Let's face it, the Republicans underperformed in a bunch of places Tuesday. And with leaders like Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy running the circus, is that really any wonder? Then I'm mad. I'm just as angry as all of you, maybe more so. I predicted a pretty big wave of Republicans taking office. That's what should have happened, to rebuff the terrible policies and the destruction the Democrats have brought on this country, but that didn't happen. And that means there's also something else that we need to face and discuss. Republicans and conservatives all over this country need to wake up. It's time we play the same game the Democrats are, because if we don't, this country will be lost. And I've seen a lot of you say that I want the GOP to cheat. Let me be perfectly clear, crystal clear. It's not what I want, so let me explain. The Democrats used the COVID pandemic and the 2020 election to reset the playing field. You know that. And in doing so, they've changed the way the political game is played into their advantage. And make no mistake about it, it's morally wrong. They're gaming the system in numerous states across the country, and they're gaming the system in most of the battleground states that Republicans need to take to have national power. And the Republicans, as much as we want them to do something about it, many can't, or in some places just haven't. But there's only so much Republicans can do in Pennsylvania, for example, controlled statewide by Democrats. Same in Michigan, where the GOP did nothing and has now lost its majority in both houses for the first time in 40 years. Republicans were making progress in PA. The GOP does currently control both chambers of the state legislature, but has that made Pennsylvania elections more secure? Has it? Has that stopped Pennsylvania judges from completely flouting the law and allowing ballots to be counted that should not be legally? Or ended mass mail-in balloting? The answer to all of those, of course, is no. It hasn't. Let me give you an analogy. It's like the Republicans are playing 1950s-style football, and it's 2022. And regardless of how great those teams were in the 50s and 60s, they get smashed in today's game. The rules have changed. You can't just run it up the gut every play anymore. But that's exactly what Republicans and their leadership look like they're doing in far too many places, handing the ball off and running it up the gut for 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Well, the Democrats, they're passing the ball down the field for big gainers. And that doesn't even include self-inflicted wounds. And that leads me back to Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell. They both worked against candidates in their own party this time around. And despite claims to the contrary, the Republican Party in my home state of Michigan didn't do candidates a lot of favors here either. And honestly, after a pretty good run, Ronna McDaniel needs to move on from being the chair of the RNC too. Time for some fresh leadership. And how about Rick Scott as Senate Majority Leader and not Mitch McConnell? Something to think about. There's also one more problem we need to discuss and overcome, and that's political balkanization. What do I mean? Well, it's the reason a dead guy won in Pennsylvania. No, I'm not talking about Fetterman. I'm talking about an actual dead guy, Tony DeLuca. And he not only won, he won in a landslide. You see, these people are voting for Democrats they don't know anything about. The guy's dead. Here's what they know: Democrat good, Republican bad. That is something we've got to break through. It's working in some places with Latinos, for example. But it's also why we're getting ridiculous stuff like this from the media. Floating the idea, you've got to hear this, floating the idea of now Senator-elect John Fetterman running for president. Seriously, listen.
Fetterman as a nominee at some point for president. I know there's some variables, obviously, but just a few. But I just, what he did in the super red, deep red parts of Pennsylvania, and the way that he ran ahead of Biden, as you were saying, ran ahead of Trump. I mean, it just makes you wonder about his future.
This is not a serious country if we have that conversation. Maybe it's not anyway. I'm not going to say anything about his future to avoid being too mean, other than his future, trust me, it's not quite that bright. But do you see the problem now? We could and should take these bogus voting laws passed during the pandemic to court, but that won't fix the problem anytime soon. It'll take years. In fact, leftist judges could well block all of those attempts. They've already done so in Pennsylvania, so we need to take power in order to get things fixed. exactly how Florida Governor Ron DeSantis did in that state. However, the results in Nevada and Arizona are giving a little bit of light back to the red team. That after Wisconsin was officially put into the Republican win column along with Alaska. It means that controlling the Senate, still not out of the question. And honestly, let's all just pray for any 2 out of 3 in Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia. And there are other bright spots. I mean, Liz Cheney has been put out to pasture. She should hope her dad doesn't stumble out of the house with a shotgun to finish the job. He has been known to be a little trigger-happy in the past. It will take a little more time, but so far at least 10 of the Republicans that voted to impeach President Trump with no witnesses and no evidence are gone. And speaking of that, nearly half of the J6 committee got flipped to red on Tuesday, too. I'll bet you didn't realize that. And the guy in charge of getting Democrats elected to Congress, he got booted out of the House himself, Sean Patrick Maloney. Another self-righteous lefty is now soon to be unemployed, so that's kind of nice. Now, what is strange, though, is that in some places Democrats are taking tiny, razor-thin victories to declare mandates and declaring their intention of ramming radical agendas right down everyone's throats, like red flag laws to disarm as many people as possible, even if they've done nothing wrong. And at the same time, rewarding criminals, of course, for their behavior by busting them out of jail without a penny in bail or a hope in hell it will improve anything for anyone living in this country, for ordinary folks like you and I. Now, you can sit there and scream it was rigged. You can do that. And maybe that happened in some places. But it doesn't look that way in Georgia, for example. I mean, Governor Kemp cruised to a 9-point win and Republicans dominated statewide. Just not in the Senate race, which is now headed to a December 6th runoff. Herschel Walker, however, is already off and running $4.5 million in donations and counting in just the first 24 hours. He'll be all right. Rigged in Wisconsin? Doesn't look that way. Republican Senator Ron Johnson won. He's far right. But so did far-left Governor Tony Evers. Ticket splitting does happen. I will say one thing about Democrats rigging the election, though, and that is how the census was manipulated from 2020. This is a really important thing that they did here. They manipulated the census to keep more new House seats from going to Florida and Texas and other red states, while protecting seats in New York and California and Illinois that we now know did not match the actual populations of those states and others. But like always, when Democrats pull these kinds of political stunts, they do it in places where nothing can be done to change the outcome. And sadly, that's true for the census. It's wrong. They cheated. They know it's wrong, but we can't fix it. And this is the way it's going to be for 10 long years. So now we have to wait for some late numbers and hope that the GOP has enough in the tank to hold off a socialist free-for-all. And one thing about a thin majority in the House, however, is this, is that it only takes a few actual conservatives to reject Kevin McCarthy for the job of Speaker. Let that sink in a little bit. But on Wednesday, Joe Biden still took a victory lap. I guess, honestly, why not? I mean, except that he is, well, incoherent, incompetent, and completely out of touch most of the time, and has wrecked the economy and allowed the Chinese Communist Party to have undue influence over this entire country. Oh, but I just digress. President Biden took this as a mandate for his policies because, like I just said, that's what Democrats do. They overreach. Oh, we won by one vote? Oh, it's a mandate. Mandate. Listen to this.
Well, we had an election yesterday. And it was a good day, I think, for democracy. And I think it was a good day for America. Excuse me, I'm a little hoarse. Our democracy has been tested in recent years, but with their votes, the American people have spoken and proven once again that democracy is who we are.
No, we are still a republic, Joe, but you weren't that good in school, we know. Now, I got to be honest, I have no idea what he's talking about, neither does anyone else most of the time, and that may be another bright spot for Republicans by the time we get to 2024, provided we can make it that far. Because now Joe Biden is doubling down on policies that remain deeply unpopular, including himself, and gosh, thinks it's time to run for president again. Yep, here it is.
Americans are frustrated, and in fact, 75% of voters say the country is heading into the wrong direction. Despite the results of last night, What in the next 2 years do you intend to do differently to change people's opinion of the direction of the country, particularly as you contemplate a run for president in 2024?
Nothing, because they're just finding out what we're doing. The more they know about what we're doing, the more support there is.
If they don't think you should run for re-election, what is your message to them, and how does that factor into your final decision about whether or not to run for re-election?
It doesn't.
What's your message to them? To those 2/3 of Americans?
Watch me.
Oh, he's going to run. It's only going to get worse, by the way, before it gets any better, and it is about to get a lot worse. I'm not going to lie to you. But if we stay in the fight, and play the game the way it is set up now, not by the rules we want, but what we have to deal with, we'll have a shot to put things right. Listen, you can't be the only person that's honest at the poker table. What happens if you are? You get clocked. Let me be clear. In many states, the rules were changed. We need to play by new rules. Am I telling you to cheat? What I'm telling you is fight like a Democrat. Do whatever it takes to win, so we can clean this mess up when we do. And if you still don't get it, anything less than what I just described isn't good enough. And I don't want to have this conversation again in 2024 and 26. Don't even have to go to 28. We wouldn't exist. Do whatever it takes. Figure out how to win. Okay? Good.